The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Groundhog Day, where we are going to discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings of this great 1993 movie starring Bill Murray and Andie MacDowell. Joining me today on the panel are Mike Denz. Hi, Mike.
How you doing?
Very well, thanks. And Shelley Kelly. Hi, Shelley.
How you doing?
Very good, very good. So, folks, before we get started, I do want to encourage you, if you have not yet done so, please subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcast app, or on the SQPN YouTube channel, where you should hit the bell to get notifications of new episodes. And I also want to encourage you to listen to, we have two kinds of episodes that we do in Secrets of Movies and TV Shows. We do this kind of, where we have a panel, we get together, we talk about a movie, and then we do Coffee and Cinema, which is me and Father Chip Hines. We go to a movie, and then when we come out, we get a cup of coffee, we sit down and talk about our very straight off the top of our head first impressions, and we have a lot of great discussions that way too. So we do a couple different things with this show, and we hope you enjoy it, and let others know about it. So I'm very tempted, and I don't think I'm going to do this, but I was tempted to start the show, go in about 10 minutes, and then restart the show, and then go another 10 minutes and restart the show again. But I think that might get a little tedious for folks, so I'm not going to do that. But just that was my idea. So
you have the music queued up, though, right? We can play the music every 5 minutes.
Except I don't want a DMCA takedown notice. So just go to Apple Music and play "I Got You, Babe" with Sonny and Cher. So, like I said, this movie came out in 1993. Stars Bill Murray and Andie MacDowell. And Chris Elliott, also prominent role. And it's directed by Harold Ramis. You know Harold Ramis from Ghostbusters and lots of other stuff like that. He was Egon in Ghostbusters, but he's also director. And written by a screenwriter named Danny Rubin. And it was his first script when he got to Hollywood. That was it was a spec script that he took around with him to get work. It's one of these things where you don't necessarily think it's going to get produced, but you bring it with you to show what you can do. So as a quick synopsis, it takes place in the town of Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania on Groundhog Day, February 2nd. Local weatherman Phil Connors is a self-important jerk forced to cover Groundhog Day every year because he's the local weatherman. He acts terrible, but he does have the hots for Rita, his producer. They cover the event. A blizzard gets them stuck in town. He wakes up the next day, and it happens all over again and again and again and again. At first, he's scared. He takes advantage by acting horribly, and then he despairs, and finally he is accepting, which is when it all finally ends. So that's a brief synopsis of it. So first, I want to start off and ask each of you your history with the movie. If you recall where you first saw it, or how many times have you seen it? Do you watch it every year? What is your history? What do you think of the movie just in general? I'll start with you, Shelley.
Well, I was telling you just before we started that I can't remember the first time I saw it. That's what's so funny. I'm looking at the date that it came out, and I know where I was. I was in grad school and working in a bookstore, so I probably saw it in the movie theater with a bunch of friends. But it's one of those movies you just think you've always had with you, kind of like Princess Bride. It's like, well,
right.
you watch it all the time. You can't be flipping the channels and this movie comes on and you just kind of get stuck watching it. And you
right.
just over and over. Oh, this is that part. Oh, stay here.
Yes.
Oh, commercial. Yes. Okay, we can flip.
How about you, Mike?
I remember seeing it in the theaters, and I remember wanting to see it because they got me with the shtick of he's going to have the same day over and over, and this should be funny. And I think that's how they drew people in with the trailers and everything. And then after, I remember coming out and I remember thinking, that was just great. That was so funny. I really love that movie. And at the time, I was working at a, I don't think it was Blockbuster yet. I think it was still the local, what they would call Video Factory. It was a video rental store And for those of you who are 30 years older or younger, you'll have to look it up.
Ask your parents.
Yeah, ask your parents. But it was like videotapes. It wasn't even DVDs. And so we could, take rentals for free. And I know they had like a copy that we could just play at the store, and I would borrow that all the time and just watch it over and over because I loved it. And if I was working on February 2nd, I worked there for a couple of years, and I thought we should just play Groundhog Day all day over and over and over again. I mean, that would just be so funny. So yeah, I've loved the movie for ever since. It does seem like it's been around forever. And when I was watching it today, my daughter sat next to me and she started asking me questions. It's the middle of the movie. And I'm like, well, haven't you seen this? And she's like, no. I'm like, we have to start over. You have to watch this from the beginning. Oh my gosh. I felt like such a bad father. I've never shown you Groundhog Day. She's going to be 20 years old this year and she's never seen it. So I made her watch the whole thing.
Well, I got to tell you, I don't remember the first time I saw it, but I had to have been in college in Steubenville, Ohio. That's where I was at the time. And that was right around the time when this movie came out, was when I actually went to Punxsutawney on Groundhog Day. And it first off, right off the bat, it looks nothing like the movie.
Yeah, they filmed it in Illinois. Yeah.
Yeah. It was filmed in Woodstock, Illinois, which actually is a picturesque town square that they can hold it in. But the real Punxsutawney is an old Pennsylvania coal town. They're coal crackers out that area, and it's it looks like it. It's kind of a little bit run down. There is no real center of town. And Gobbler's Knob, which is what it's called, Gobbler's Knob is where they do the whole ceremony. It's out on the edge of town, like in a park, and it was a lot of fun. We were a bunch of college grad students driving out. We didn't stay overnight. There's a thing where people drive and they go and they stay overnight, and in the movie they talk about how they sing songs. Then when they get cold, they go back by the fire. Then they go sing some more songs, and there when they do it overnight, they drink, sing songs, get warm by the fire, and then drink some more. And then around getting close to dawn, they kind of wander. The college kids and those types wander off, and the families come, and that's who are there for when they do the ceremony, which is just like in the movie. It's very similar to how they do it in the movie.
Yeah, I heard that even the people from Punxsutawney thought that Woodstock, Illinois looked better. That was a better choice than their own town. Yeah.
One thing about Punxsutawney is with Groundhog Day is they have pancake breakfast everywhere you go. Is another like a pancake breakfast everywhere. So if you ever find yourself out that way on February 2nd, find yourself at a pancake breakfast, head over to Gobbler's Knob and enjoy it, because it's a lot of fun. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing this episode right now, is because we're right around Groundhog Day as we record this and as we release it. So that's one of the things that came up with Danny Rubin, the screenwriter, said he chose Groundhog Day for sort of out of the air. He originally was just going to be just a random day in January, and he was writing it in a January. And as he looked at the calendar, he saw that Groundhog Day was coming up. He thought it would be kind of cool to have it attached to a specific day, like a holiday, but not like Christmas, because that's done. That's been, there's all kinds of Christmas movies. But it would be cool if it were a holiday like Arbor Day or Groundhog Day, and then people would watch it every year on that day, which is kind of what happened. Yeah. So that was good.
It's hard to imagine the movie without it being Groundhog Day, because Groundhog Day is an integral part of the set, and it's part of everything there.
Right.
It is the setting.
All revolves around Groundhog Day.
Yes.
And what happens in Punxsutawney. Yeah.
And it's the personality of Groundhog Day that it's about. It's about, Phil's at first, he's contemptuous of these small town hicks, but really it's about small town values in a one sense, that it really is and we'll get into this as we go through it, but it's really Punxsutawney itself is part of that, or the Punxsutawney style of town is really part of, it's a character in the story. It's an integral part of the story. So the basic thing here, again, Danny Rubin, the screenwriter, said he started with the question, if a person could be immortal, how would they change over time? Which is an interesting question for us who are Catholics, approaching this from a Catholic point of view, because we know that people are immortal. But that's an interesting question. Do we change over time in the sense of after our life here on Earth? Do we continue to change in the afterlife? I think there's some theologians would say we would. We are, even though we're immortal, we will live forever. We're still time-based creatures, and therefore we are subject to change over time. So that's an interesting question. But I really kind of thought that was an interesting premise to begin with, is if a person could be immortal, how could they change over time, knowing that it's not going to end? And that's a kind of an interesting way to look at it. And because it's sort of broad and open-ended, it sort of became the basis for a lot of philosophical discussions, not just from Christians, but Buddhists, ethicists, philosophers, everybody kind of weighing in on it. So I thought that was interesting how it's accessible to a lot of different religious, spiritual, philosophical points of view because it's sort of broad. So what do you think of like that question as we enter into this movie, this question of, it's sort of open-ended and broad question, which for a comedy, which is essentially a comedy.
Yeah, well, it brings to mind a couple of other movies too, because I think this topic's been used before. I'm thinking of Highlander with Sean Connery, who wants to live forever. And then if I remember correctly, the writer came up with the idea after seeing Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice. And and we've got so many vampire movies now these days, but so that is where he started the question, what if you could live forever? How would you change? I had a little bit different take on that too. I know you went straight to our everlasting life, but when we get into more details on this, purgatory comes to mind,
right?
Because of the purification and the change that he goes through in this experience.
Yeah, it's interesting. In the beginning of the movie, after Phil goes through 3 or 4 days, he starts pondering the question. He asks Rita the question, and what would you do if you knew this was your last day, and how would you live it? And he kind of looks at it that way for a while, like, well, I just have 1 day to live, so I can do anything I want. There's no consequences. But then as we will get into the movie, we see that his view of what he's been given is not just this. There's no consequences, and I can't get in trouble for anything, and whether I die or whatever, it's everything's going to start over. Into what he can do, how he can take advantage of this. So first, it's how he can take advantage, and then it's really how he can improve himself. And that's where I heard the purgatory idea come in. Someone purges themselves of how they are and becomes the best version of themselves. Or a lot of people bring up the Buddhist reincarnation, that this idea of he keeps on being reincarnated in the same day until he gets it right.
Right, and that's one of the things is it can be purgatory. He's literally purging himself of these attachments to sin. It could be karma, an ascension, and reincarnation and ascension to a higher plane. It sort of accepts a lot of these things, and I want to get into some of that after we work through the plot itself. But yeah, it's very interesting how this movie is sort of a template that a lot of people can connect with. And in fact, it's such a blank slate for people that the term Groundhog Day has entered the public consciousness as shorthand for either something that helps you transcend yourself or as something that loops over and over. Groundhog Day now has this idea of, where you just you're running a treadmill, you're doing the same thing over and over again. So I thought that's interesting too. So there's this loop that he goes through that Phil experiences this day over and over again. One of the enduring questions that has consumed many photons on the internet, many pixels, many bytes of data. How long was the loop? Do either of you have a sense of, a guess of? I know what I've seen in that maybe even the screenwriters have alluded to, but did you ever in your mind as you watch it a sense of how long the loop was?
I know I did. And if you count them, I think it's 37 or 38 days that you are seeing in the movie. However, he masters the piano, he masters a language, and there's a couple other things that he really steps up and learns.
Ice sculpting.
ice sculpting. Yes, right. And so the only time he really alludes to time is when they're flipping the cards, and she says, "How did you get so good at this? It would take a lifetime." He's not 4 or 5 months, 4 or 5 hours a day,
right?
But I'm going to go with about somewhere up between 10 and 12, 15 years, because when you want to be a professional at something, you need the experience to really have gone through things over and over and gathered that experience. So you start as like an apprentice and then a novice, and you get good at it, but then to become a professional, you need at least 10 years of experience. And I saw that in how he was playing the piano and how he was doing that ice sculpture. It would take me 10 years to learn to do stuff like that.
Yeah, I remember counting before there was internet and you could look it up and everything. Somewhere in the 90s, I counted to and I got to like Shelley said 38 or something like that. That you can actually say, okay, this was a start over. This is a start over. This was another day. Even if it was all the slaps that you had to count, Rita slapping him. Okay, 8. one day. That it's obviously a lot more. And then I heard where some people were saying, well, it looks like it was about 10 years, but other people, when they went through the whole idea of, well, let's look at how much he messed up and then how much time he would have to devote himself to these different things, got into 30 or 40 years, which is actually what Harold Ramis originally said. That's what he kind of figured it was, about 30 or 40 years worth of days that he went through.
Well, I think, and that works with what you said, Shelley, because he probably spent 10 or 20 years alone just in those first few stages before he got to the point where he wanted to start to master things like piano and languages and that sort of stuff. So I can see that. But if you stop and think about that, 30 or 40 years of the same day over and over, what would it be like to have that next day? That's one thing that I think about. I heard
somebody say he went 40 years without a hot shower. That's a long time.
Yes, right.
I thought of that too. Every time that water was cold.
So one thing that makes this movie, I think, is so good is that there is no explanation. There's no explanation for why it starts, who puts him in this loop, how it ends, why does it end. There's no explanation. It just happens and then it ends. And Phil experiences it, but they don't ruin it. And I think that's what it would do. It would ruin it if they told us that God was doing it to him, or that aliens, or whatever, if they explained it. I kind of like that fact.
Yeah, there was talk of like an old girlfriend cursed him or something, and that would have just added a plot point that would have ruined it. And you didn't need it. You didn't need it at all. It was much better the way they did it.
Yeah, no, I agree. In fact, I was watching it, and when it got to the end, if I may skip to the end, and they come out of the house, right? Spoiler. Sorry, it's a what, 30-something-year-old movie.
Yes, everything is spoilers in this episode.
They come out of that house, and he's like, let's live here. We'll rent first. I'm like, no, you missed it, man. You should have ended it when he looks at her and says, is there anything I can do for you today? And because I don't know. For me, that was the end. Cue, pull it out, play the music, new day, bright, sunny, snow, done.
So right. That's a good point. That's a good.
I mean, that was the definitive line.
Yes.
What he figured out, what he learned.
Sorry to jump there so quick.
That's fine.
Let's start and go back.
So let's loop back to the beginning and start again. And so here we have Phil Connors, the weatherman, who's charming, but a little cruel. He's charming, funny, and a little cruel, a little mean to everybody. And he's at this weather station, and it's February 2nd, and he's being sent to Punxsutawney because, as the lead weatherman, that's his job. And
it's actually February 1st when he's there, when he's being sent.
Yeah, and I'm stuck on the description charming. So there's nothing about him in the beginning that is charming to me, the only female here.
Well, he can be charming if he needs to be.
Yeah,
it's all fake.
Oh yeah, it's fake.
Well, he does charm a couple of ladies in this, and they fall for his fake charms. But yes, you're right. But there's this glibness about him. There's this ability to have this patter down. And he's funny. But like I said, he's a little mean, and he's going being sent there with the cameraman played by Chris Elliott and with Rita played by Annie McDowell. And what I really like about Rita, I feel like Rita's the important one in this movie. She is the standard. She's not naive. Rita is kind and gentle and funny and a pleasant person and a good person, but she's not naive. She doesn't fall for Phil's bluster. She doesn't get angry at him for being mean to her. She just kind of pities him. She's sad for him. And it's Rita's empathy, her kindness, her generosity that changes Phil. She is the standard of excellence that he has to live up to throughout the movie, that he's trying to live up to. And every time he falls short, he has to start again. And, she tosses him out, slaps him 8 times in a row. And it's Rita that's I feel like is the linchpin to this movie.
She's definitely the catalyst in his change, because there's a bit before he gets depressed where he's asking her, what's the perfect man? What's what's your perfect man? She describes it and he's like, I'm really close on this. I can do this. Yeah. But when he fails is when he falls to his rock bottom.
Yes.
And then once he stops focusing on himself is when he changes. I mean, really begins to change.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a line in the beginning when they're leaving, when he's first meeting her, because that's the day they met. That's what's so interesting.
Yep.
All of this relationship with her takes place on the second day that they know each other.
Especially from her point of view.
Right. And but he tells her, or someone tells him that he thinks that doing the groundhog means he doesn't have a future. And he's concerned about his future. There's a bigger station looking for me. So I thought that was interesting that he's only looking out for who he is and how he's going to get what his next thing.
Right. He's always looking to the next big thing, his next big break. That's true.
Yeah, and he thinks the groundhog thing is beneath him.
Right. Right.
Yeah, he's better than this.
It's small market, TV. He wants to go to the network. So they get to the town. They stay overnight. He's staying in a nice bed and breakfast, and he wakes up in the morning to the clock radio. Now this iconic clock radio. This is a clock radio that I don't know if it exists. This sort of thing exists anymore. It's the one. It's got the flippy numbers with a number.
I had one of those.
I had one too.
Yeah. And it's a literal character in the movie. The clock radio.
Oh yeah. And there's this great shot at one point in the movie of it's as if the clock were gigantic and the numbers. It's flipping from 5:59 to 6, and this ponderous movement of the numbers down, and it. Boom! It's like
the weight have the music going with the it's like a THX opening or something. And
yes,
like that.
It's the weight of time. Boom! So there's this great clock radio, and then also almost like another character in the movie, the song starts playing that's been playing on the morning zoo radio station that it's tuned to. "I Got You, Babe" by Sonny and Cher. Which do we think this is a subliminal message about the theme of the movie, about him trying to get the babe at the end? It's a romantic movie.
I don't know. I mean, I thought it just kind of fits the whimsical part of the Groundhog Day is one of those holidays that is in the middle of the deep winter, and it just brings a little bit of almost comic relief, whimsy to it. And
yes.
the movie kicks off with this very circus-like whimsical music, and so "I Got You, Babe's" just one of those, I don't know, it makes you smile. It's kind of funny. Yeah. But I hadn't thought of that from the "I Got You, Babe."
Well, one of the things about it is it's a song that keeps going back to that verse over and over, like "I got you, babe."
Right.
I got
and
you.
Put your little hand in mine.
Yeah, and then it goes back to it. It's like it's the repetitiveness of the movie is the song's like a little microcosm of that. It's just going to keep repeating over and over. And not only does he have to hear it every day, but the song itself has that repetitive one line that just over and over again.
So Phil has some interactions with the folks in the bed and breakfast. Some nice funny bits where again that meanness comes out.
Let me back up real quick before the two disc jockeys. Yes. And their little banter in the beginning, which he recognizes on the second day, like, "You're playing yesterday's tape, guys." Mm-hmm. that it becomes a part of like that he changes it like it's going to be, he describes winter the way they describe winter, but he puts it in the lower tone, and wake up little kid and put your booties on because it's gonna be cold out there. It's cold
Campers
out
rise
there
and
every
shine,
day.
and don't forget your booties. It's
Yeah.
cold out there.
Yeah.
It's cold every day.
puts it
What is
in,
this,
like,
Miami
the
Beach?
depressing-
Seen it a
yeah.
few times.
Yeah. But he's like when he does it the slow way, like it's cold out there. It's cold out there every day, and that's when he's really falling into depression. So their little banter becomes this kind of thing that echoes throughout, and all these people that he meets are so intricate and so well done. I just love it, from the big guy on the steps to the poor clueless lady downstairs to the best of them all, Ned Ryerson. I mean, all those people he meets are so great.
Well, we cannot pass by Ned Ryerson. Stephen Tobolowsky plays this wonderful character who is just like, I mean, I walk around the house doing what the kids, right. Am I right? Am I right? Right.
Oh, my wife and I do that. Bing! I mean,
Bing!
everything.
I mean, he played it so broad, so big, and it was so perfect. This great character. I mean, you just cringe for Phil Connors as he has to meet this guy who remembers him and he doesn't remember for a second, and just has to endure this guy, and like over and over again until that wonderful moment where they have this where he's really getting into it. He's really kind of wants to freak out this guy. So this time he meets Ned. He gives him a hug, Ned, and hugs him too long. And then Bill Murray ad-libbed this line where he goes, I don't know where you're going, but do you think you could cancel whatever you get going on this morning? And it's so creepy. It's so funny. And Ned's reaction is so great. And he's like,
he went right with it. I gotta go. And he runs away in this like freaky way. Like he just can't wait to get out of there.
Oh, just perfect.
Yeah. Ned was great. Like, he introduces himself and he's like, so did you go professional with that belly button thing? Like, well, guess what I do now? I'm an insurance agent. What a shock. Every little line that goes on with Ned, and then the one time when he punches him, just knocks him out.
You got to watch out for that first step. It's a doozy.
Every time
we say that all the time.
Well, that's another thing with this movie. It's got so many quotable lines. It's so awesome.
Yeah, it's not quite at the Princess Bride quotable, but it's up there.
It is up there. It's like Caddyshack quotable almost. It's got him. So the funny thing with Ned is that last time they meet, he talks about how Phil bought every imaginable policy from him, and I'm thinking to myself, this is the time where he gets to the next day. Phil's on the hook for all this insurance.
My daughter said the same thing, but wait a minute, he just blew all his money on all that insurance. So that's going to be a problem.
Yeah. So Phil shows up at the Groundhog Day ceremony. He's got to do his shtick. Again, as I mentioned, it's pretty accurate to the actual ceremony. I love the Pennsylvania polka that's playing in the background, the people dancing. I just love that feeling. There's he does a thing. He's pretty perfunctory about it, and then they get in the truck to go back to Pittsburgh. He wants to get out of that town as fast as he can, and then the really great thing is how Phil, this weatherman who thinks so much of himself, missed the forecast. Like this whole thing, he just every day for the next 30 to 40 years from his point of view, he is reminded that he screwed up this forecast for this day in such a bad way where they get stuck in the blizzard. I just love that part of it.
I never even thought about that he had to be reminded that he made a mistake over and over and over again.
And every time he explains it, he's always getting into that cameraman talk,
Yeah.
What are you talking about? All this is, and it's gonna push off.
It's pushing in from the west. Yeah. And we've got moisture coming up from the Gulf. It's gonna miss us and hit Altoona. But he's so arrogant when he after he's trying to get through on the phone on the payphone. And don't you have a special line just for celebrities?
Celebrities and emergencies.
Yeah,
I'm both. I'm a celebrity in an emergency. Yeah,
and I thought that really dated the movie too, because you don't notice the lack of cell phones and internet and Wi-Fi.
Yes.
But when he's on that phone with the cord and he can't get a long distance line. And you're like, Whoa.
He is isolated in this town, which is a big part of that, I think. If it were something that was today, where you could get on a cell phone, you could get on the internet, you wouldn't be as isolated in the town. And that would change it, I think. So
it's one of those movies you really couldn't update.
Right. I would hate for them to remake this movie.
It wouldn't work
Right.
in the after the 2000s, after the turn of the century, with everything you could have access to, the world being so much smaller. It has to be plus when it was or earlier.
The style movie today,
much more about relationships and face-to-face interactions.
Yeah. And the style movie, which it would be too cynical today, too gritty. It would know this movie is uplifting. There's some hard parts in the middle, but this is an ultimately uplifting movie, and I don't think it would be made the same way today. So they go back to Punxsutawney. Phil doesn't go to dinner with Rita, and what is Chris Elliott's character's name?
Larry.
Larry, that's right. He's got to be a Larry. So he doesn't go to dinner with Rita and Larry. He wakes up the next morning, and he's got the same morning show. The people are outside. There's no snow on the ground. And he eventually convinces himself that he must have imagined the previous day, or that it was deja vu of some kind.
He's concerned, but he's not overly. But this is the day where he gets to the end of it and he breaks the pencil to see if what'll happen on the third day. Like he wants to, that's where he tests it.
Right. So the next day, the first day is he's confused. The next day, he's angry and scared. He, in fact, tells Rita, who doesn't believe him, that this is happening, and ends up going to a doctor for x-rays. And then the psychiatrist, who's this terrible psychiatrist, who only
looks
treats...
like he's in high school.
Yeah, exactly. He only treats like small town problems, like, couples counseling and stuff.
I have an alcoholic now.
Yeah, I got an alcoholic now. Phil's telling him, my problem is I think I'm living the same day over and over again. So he says, could we make an appointment for tomorrow? Like, totally missing the boat, buddy.
And don't blink, because you know who the doctor is.
Oh, it's Harold Ramis.
It's Harold Ramis.
Yeah.
That's right. He's got to make an appearance.
He's got to be in the movie. And then he ends up hanging out with these two local drunk guys who gives him advice. He says, what would you do if every day was the same? You're in the same place and nothing you did mattered. And the one guy goes, that pretty much sums it up for me.
For me, yeah.
And so one of them says something along the lines of, well, you'd have no consequences. And that's where he decides to live as if nothing he does has any consequences, including he starts like a police chase and running things over and gets pulled over by the cops after playing chicken with the train. I think he's going to swerve at the last minute. He says in the train.
He deadpans that line, and you just, you're watching it. He says that, and you just can't help laugh.
Exactly.
Yeah. I really do. Just when I look at Bill Murray, who I've been a fan of in many things, that this was the pinnacle of his comedy prowess. He was so good in this movie. Yes, he did good things after and before, but I think this one really was just him at his peak. He was so good in this movie.
An interesting personal note about Bill Murray at this time, while this movie was filming, his marriage was falling apart.
Yeah.
And I think I saw something where it mentioned that he helped rewrite some of the movie with Danny Rubin and Harold Ramis and inserted some of the darker stuff to really kind of ground it a little bit more than it was. It was a romantic comedy, at first, and then so the first script was more weird sci-fi. Then it became a romantic comedy, and then he kind of brought in some of the darker parts of Phil, and I think that really added to it. But you're right, this is Bill Murray really at his comedic peak, just doing what he does so well on screen.
Yeah. He also brought in. I was reading Rita to sleep. He said that on his honeymoon, his wife had drank too much and champagne and fell asleep. So he just read to her until he was too tired and he fell asleep.
Oh, interesting. So on the third day through, Phil is now living without consequences. He punches Ned, lets another guy step in the water puddle, goes to the diner and orders all the food. He's sitting there at this table with all this food. And he says, I don't worry about anything anymore. He tells Rita.
And he's smoking a cigarette.
Exactly. And when he tells Rita that, he doesn't worry about anything more, she quotes this obscure poetry from Sir Walter Scott. Like, my wife, who is a English major, she taught as an English professor, is like, who quotes Walter Scott? That's like the most obscure thing. And it's just so funny that she pulls this, the wretch concentrated all in self, living shelf of fair renown. And I'm like, what? She must have been, I said that out loud, actually. I said she must have been an English major. And I got a glare, but that's okay.
The funny thing about that, because I had to go look it up and see where it was from, The Lay of the Last Minstrel, 1805. But it's not even French poetry.
Well, that's the thing.
I mean, and so that's what makes it so funny. You get the impression that maybe she's that liberal arts major, but at the same time, once you find out about the French poetry thing, you're like, why is she quoting English?
It's like, why is she quoting I mean, you're at the bottom of the barrel with poetry there.
And where did the writer find it?
I know. I mean, I feel like Danny Rubin's been holding on to that one for a long time.
Because he didn't have the internet to just Google around and find, poetry that talks about being wretched souls.
Poetry about a narcissist.
Exactly.
Egocentric narcissist.
Yeah.
So this is where Phil catches sight of Nancy Taylor in the pretty lady. And he straight up asks her, like, where'd you go to high school? What was your mate? Like, what was your favorite class? Who was your senior? He's basically mining for information out of her straight up, and then walks away so that the next day he can hit on her as if they're old friends, which is what he does. He's so desperate for human contact in his life and he hits on her, and it's successful, except when he's with Nancy, they're, making out by the fire in his room, the fake fire, by the way, in his room. He calls her Rita, and like, oh, yeah, that's interesting. And then he tells her, I love you. Will you marry me? And she falls for it. Poor Nancy. Oh, you could do better, Nancy.
This is the day that he realized, with the train tracks, and we missed it when they crashed into the cars, and he orders lunch. He
orders drive-through from the car.
Yeah, that was great. Too early for flapjack. But this is what I call like his pleasure. He's going to fill his emptiness with pleasure.
Yes.
He goes after sex. Mm-hmm. He goes after money. He goes, whatever, he can do to try to fill, like, okay, I can do things. But eventually it becomes too empty for him.
He's going to literally feed the appetites. He started with the food at the diner, but he's going to feed all the appetites, the carnal appetites, and get all the money and think this is what's going to make me happy. Of course, we know it doesn't. I did like this. Right after this is where we have the armored car heist, and we get the realization that now time has passed such that he's able to case the town. He knows all the people. He knows he's seen the stuff going on with this armored car often enough that he knows the exact timing of when a car is going to pass. A breeze blows from the east.
Gust of wind.
Yeah. This is the first time where we've known they definitely skipped days.
Yes. Yep. And then, cue the quarters, and he grabs the bag and goes.
How you doing, Felix? Oh, I'm just fine.
And right after this, he shows up at the movies in a new Mercedes dressed as Clint Eastwood with another date who's dressed as a French maid. I thought we were going to a costume party, she says.
Told you to call me Bronco. And then
you saw what they're watching.
They're
watching Heidi.
Heidi 2.
Heidi 2, the sequel.
Yeah. And he goes, I love this movie. I've seen it 100 times. I'm like, what?
That's awesome. So,
he's seen it 100 times. That's another clue.
Yes. So unhappy, he's gotten what he's gotten so far. He's unhappy with it. He realizes what he really wants is to be with Rita. So he starts pumping Rita for information to do to her what he did to Nancy and apparently has done to other women. And so, like you said, Shelley, she describes her perfect man, and Phil. And the interesting is that's eventually who Phil will become by the end of the movie. He fulfills all that description that she names out. And then after days of working her for this information, we get to, they're at dinner at this amazing Hofbrauhaus, this amazing like German restaurant, Pennsylvania Dutch. And over dinner, she tells him she majored. I like this part. She tells him she majored in 19th century French poetry in college, and he laughs in her face at like, oh, I didn't realize you were serious. I'm like, oh man, ouch. And he has to start all over again. And so, but this time he memorizes some French poetry. And I'm like, how long did he dedicate to this interim of when he found out she majored in French, 19th century French poetry, and he's memorized the French poetry? You know, it's got to have been days.
Yeah, but in that next time after this time has passed, he gets a glimpse of what he's striving for, because he has basically a perfect day with her.
Right.
And she even says it, you know, this day's been so perfect you couldn't plan it. He's like, well, actually, yeah, you can. It takes a lot of work. You know?
Yeah.
But it's still not fulfilling. It's still not what he needs to be, because he still doesn't know what love is.
Is he doing all this
because
just...
he's still tricking her? It's not real. Yeah. It's just him being himself, but trying to manipulate her.
Real.
Yeah, he's trying to manipulate her into a relationship of some sort in the best way he knows how, but it's just not real. It's still egocentric. It's still, you know, him trying to have a physical relationship with her by the end of the day, you know.
Him trying to win something. Yeah.
And he says, I love you. And she says, how? You don't even know me. You know, we've had one day and, you know, this is just a setup. Is this what love is for you? You'll never love anyone but yourself.
Yeah. He knows stuff about her, but he doesn't know her, the person. And at the end, he will know her and loves her for who she is and not what he can get from her. But at this point, he just, and that's one of the things I ask myself at this point, is he still just trying to score with her? At what point is he falling in love with her? Like, this is a lot of effort to devote to this one woman for as much time as is apparently passing, months, year, even, you know, that he's trying to connect with her at this level. At what point is he in love with her and doesn't realize it?
I think he wants to, because when he said the first time he saw her, and they were able to film this well because they did the opening scene last. And if you watch it, when he sees her and she's, you know, playing with this blue screen and stuff, and he stares at her for a few seconds, you know, almost like in awe. And then later on, he says, when I first saw you, I knew I wanted to hold you so tight. So he knew he wanted her, but he hasn't yet developed the maturity to love her and to be the type of man that she, you know, is describing in the restaurant the one time. Right. And faking it like he did, she saw right through it. You know, and it takes the rest of the movie for him to get to that point.
Right. I like that the next time through, after that slap in the face, he gets manic. Like he's now just kind of like frantically trying to recapture that perfect day they had. And like even to the point like with the snow again. Yeah. They have the snowball fight with the kids and they fall in the snow together, and he's trying to like, you see Bill Murray is like trying to get into that perfect spot, like exactly the spot where they had the spontaneous moment, and he's trying to get into that spot and squirming around, and it's just like it's a perfect acting out of that. Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, it was.
That's when we get the 8 days of slaps.
You can just see him fail.
It's not working.
He cannot get past that point. And you think of it, yeah, of course, because she's known him for a day, and she's not that kind of girl or woman. Yeah. Sorry. But you know what I mean? She's a good person. She's a moral person. You know, she's I'm not going to, no matter how good this day is, I'm not going to sleep with you today. I mean, that's sort of what she's saying here. And so despair sets in. So now Phil moves into the despair phase.
Yeah. He says, I'm at the end of me, Rita.
Yes.
Like he can't go on anymore.
Yeah, he says,
and he looks terrible.
Winter will last your entire life. That line that you mentioned.
Yeah. And it's going to last the rest of your life. And isn't this when he steals the groundhog?
Yeah, well, first we have this montage of him destroying the alarm clock every morning.
Oh, yeah.
Which is fun.
He can't get out of bed. He's depressed.
But yes, he decides that the groundhog, for some reason, is the cause of his loop. If the groundhog must die, if only could kill the groundhog, he'll. And so we have him stealing the groundhog and driving with this thing in his lap off the limestone quarry cliff. And to his, I love it as it lands upside down. Larry says, "Well, it's possibly survived." And then boom, the fireball. Maybe not. Then he focuses the camera, because he's a cameraman.
Back to the camera. Yeah.
He's doing his job.
And his driving with the groundhog. Don't drive angry. Check your mirrors, side of the eye. All that was improvised with him and the groundhog.
And tell me, your mind didn't go to Caddyshack.
Oh, totally.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Well, they
exactly.
actually said that they were thinking of him going in there and getting the groundhog, and they said that's going to be too Caddyshack. Because he went in after it wasn't a groundhog, a mole or whatever the heck it was in Caddyshack. Yeah, so they didn't want to go over Caddyshack, but they did say that he, when he was teaching her how to throw cards into a hat, when he said "be the hat," it was like Chevy Chase saying "be the ball."
Exactly, be the ball, Danny. Be the ball.
So a little homage to Caddyshack there.
So I saw something that said that in that scene where he was driving with the groundhog in his lap, he got bit 3 times. Then he actually had to go through a whole rabies shot phase of shots. He was really not happy with that scene.
Oh, I can imagine that would not want to be his assistant or anybody around him after he gets bit by a groundhog.
Oh, no way. So then Phil goes through his suicidal phase where we have all these different ways where he's trying to die. He's trying to kill himself. He steps in front of a truck. He jumps off the clock tower. I'm trying to think of all the other. There's a couple of ways.
He took the toaster and electrocuted himself on the top.
Showed.
Right.
The one where he jumps off the tower is when it really gets dramatic and dark because with the music playing, the slow motion, and that's when they had to go identify him. In the morgue. That's really where you're okay. It's rock bottom. He's just spending every day looking for a way to kill himself.
But we don't get to see all the times that he tried to kill himself because later he tells Rita, she's like, they're having a conversation. He tells her he's a god.
Yes.
And she says, why? Because you survived a car wreck. And he's like, nope, I've been stabbed, shot, poisoned, frozen, hung, electrocuted, and burned. And every morning I wake up, not a scratch on me. And she's like, yeah, no, I don't think that's how that works.
What I found interesting was they when he dies, the day goes on. The day continues to its end and resets. So it's not like he dies and then the day is reset. So it's not centered on him per se in that sense, although he's the one element in that day that keeps repeating. I just thought that was interesting. So yes, so as you mentioned, Shelley, the next phase is where he thinks he's a god. He can't be killed. And this is where Rita starts to believe him, because that great scene in the diner where he's telling her everything about everybody in the diner. This is, what's her name? She came here from Ireland as a baby and grew up in Erie. And here's this couple. They're getting married today, but she's having second thoughts and is thinking of backing out. It goes through, through all these people. And it keeps all these different things happen where he kind of convinces her. And they have this scene where she spends the day with him. In the end, with her flipping the cards in the hat, like you mentioned.
Right. Yep.
And he's come to accept himself, and he's being authentic. And this is actually where Rita starts to see him in a certain way. And he says it's not a curse. She says it's not a curse. It just depends on how you look at it. And I think that's one of the things that changes. As they get to the morning and they flips over and he wakes up without her there next to him, and he's sad because he had this real connection with Rita the night before, and now he's reset back to their relationship when he was a jerk to her. And I was thinking, when I was talking with Melanie about this as we watched it, in a way it's like dealing with someone you love having dementia. She can't fully love him because she only has a day to get to know him, but for him it's a lifetime. Like someone whose loved one has Alzheimer's or dementia of some sort, where you love them because you have a history together, but they don't have that history anymore. They don't know you.
Yeah. Which brings to mind another movie, and that's called 50 First Dates.
We thought we'd said exactly the same thing. Yes, it's another movie that's in the same vein where he has to go on a date. The actors are Adam Sandler,
Yeah,
Drew Barrymore.
Drew Barrymore,
right, in Hawaii. And they have to go on 51st dates because she has something that makes her forget every day.
Yeah, she had a car accident that hit the temporal front lobe, and every day she wakes up, it's the same day.
And there's also the Notebook is all about him going to his wife and reading to her about their life.
Right.
And the wife doesn't even know it's their life, until she gets lucid enough to remember.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But going back to Groundhog Day, there's this one line that he says. She's falling asleep, and like you said about the reading the poetry, and he says, "What I wanted to say is, I think you're the kindest, sweetest, prettiest person I've never seen anyone that's nicer to people than you are. I don't deserve someone like you." And it reminds me also, another movie, of the movie with Jack Nicholson and Helen Hunt. I can't remember the name of it.
Terms of Endearment? No. No.
Is
that the one where he was like an obsessive compulsive?
Yes. And he says, "You make me want to be a better person."
Right.
And it's like suddenly like Phil has looked at Rita and seen another person, and he can see himself reflected, and he's not what she is, and he wants to be like her.
Right.
So now it's the beginning of that turnaround right there.
The movie was as good as it gets.
He doesn't think he exists anymore. He's completely stripped away and emptied. And how do you rebuild a life?
So I love that. I wrote this down myself, like you did. I don't deserve someone like you, but if I ever could, I would love you for the rest of my life. What a great line! That is such a great line.
It's beautiful.
So much like you say it in your vows at your wedding. I mean, that's the sort of line that is. It's so selfless and self-giving. And this is where we get the switch to the good and the kind Phil. So he's trying to be the kind of man that Rita deserves, not so that she'll love him back, but because that's what she inspires him to want to be that kind of guy. And this is what makes it different from the other time where he's just trying to score with her by pretending to be, a good guy. And so we have self-improvement, Phil. He's reading books. He's learning Italian, taking piano lessons, ice sculpting. Then he starts
being nice to Larry.
Being nice to Larry.
Yeah, that first day after she stayed with him and he woke up and she wasn't there is the first day he notices other people.
Yes.
It's the first day he sees the beggar on the street. He's walked past him how many times and done what a lot of us do, looked away or didn't really look at him. He walks by and sees him and gives him all the money he has.
Right.
He brings the coffee. He asks Larry his opinion on the shot. And you're like, that's such a moment there.
Yeah. That's
Larry's
a big step for him.
You're focused on somebody, not yourself.
Yes. I love the part with the old man, the old homeless man, because no matter what he does, and he tries and tries and tries, he can't save the old man. It is because it's his time. This day, February 2nd, is the day this man will die because it's just his time. As the nurse says, it's just some people's time. And rather than, again, fall back into despair, it doesn't make him stop trying to save other people or to save this or to be kind to this man. He keeps doing kind things for him and visiting him in the alley where he dies and being with him as he passes away every one of these days. I mean, it's a beautiful moment in that. And then he starts saving other people. The kid who falls out of the tree, who never says thank you.
You see that kid in the hospital with a broken leg. When he brings the old man a broken leg, he's in the background with a broken leg. So
good.
He starts saying to him, "You never thank me." And also with the old man, he refers to him as his father several times. He calls him Pops. He calls him father. And I think he might call him Dad once too. And I always wondered if there's something about he wasn't there with his dad. I mean, who knows what backstory they ever wrote, but it seemed odd that that's how he always referred to him. Pops, Dad. He even called him father once.
But see, I was thinking that calling him father, dad, pop was, you learn love first from your parents. And by seeing this homeless man who had nothing at all to give him, there's nothing he could get or earn or there was nothing in it for him, Phil. But he's seeing this man for the first time and he's giving of himself. And it's the first time I think that Phil has ever done that. And so that's love. And so right there, when you love something better than yourself, and that's his first experience. So I was wondering if they were calling him father or dad or pops to kind of subliminally reflect that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's interesting. I never heard anyone, reflect on why they did that. And it was too many. He did it too many times for it to be just a coincidence or just an ad lib that Bill Murray put in there. I thought there must be something to it.
I was thinking it might have been, that Phil was being kind to a man who at the end of his life might not have been all connected there. And somehow, like, this man probably has kids or wanted to have a son. And I'm being that loving son for him in that way, that maybe he thinks I'm his son. But that's a couple different ways to look at it. So he saves the kid in the tree. He helps the old ladies with the flat tire. He's the man from the auto club.
Yeah.
He saves the choking man in the restaurant.
His brother in real life.
His brother, yes, his real life brother. And he does this. He serves without expectation of return or even of being able to fix the things because he knows it's going to happen again tomorrow. And in some ways, it's like Mother Teresa in Calcutta, where she picks up one dying person off the street, not because it's going to fix what's wrong with Calcutta or even just solve the problems of these people in the street, but because it's the loving thing to do. And that's what Phil is doing here. I mean, is it a stretch to compare him to Mother Teresa? But in a way, that's what Mother Teresa did, and that's what he's doing.
Yeah, and then there's also when he's bettering himself by reading. So he's got all these great books in the diner, and then he hears the piano playing.
Yep. And
the great scene where he first goes there and says, "I'll give you $1,000 if you take me today," and she kicks the girl out.
That was great. The poor girl's like standing on the porch, like, why am I out here?
What happened?
And one of the things that I really like in this is even when Rita begins to express interest in him, he doesn't go in for the kill. He doesn't go, he doesn't try to score here. He's done with that, which is interesting. And then we get to the charity auction at the dance, the big Groundhog Day ball, where he's playing the piano, which is really awesome. Like he's playing the piano like a virtuoso. And she bids on him at the charity auction. In fact, several of them bid on. She bids everything in her checkbook. Yeah, I don't know if you caught that. Like it's going
everything in her wallet. Yeah,
yeah.
All the cash that she had, $339.88.
And this is when he's stopped trying. This is when she got interested, and they're together overnight. Now, it's very clear, I think, that nothing physical happens to them here. And he says to her as she's asleep next to him, as we're getting closer to the 6 a.m. click over, he says, "Whatever happens tomorrow or for the rest of my life, I'm happy now because I love you." He is living in the moment. He's accepting of whatever he can have, and that's enough for him. And that is apparently enough to, or whatever it is that needs to break this loop that he's in.
And it's the act of loving is what brings him the joy, not the reciprocation of the love.
Yes,
that he's trying to look for. There's also the moment when he's carving her face in the ice, and comes right before they'll go back up to the room and they're talking. And when he turns it, she shows her, and they have a kiss, and it starts snowing. And that's been some people have thought that similar to It's a Wonderful Life, when everything became real again and it started snowing, that might be actually the moment when the day was going to turn for him. He had crossed the threshold of where he needed to be, so that it was going to be tomorrow. The next day was going to be the 3rd.
Because he looked puzzled when he saw the snow. Yeah. There's this moment where he looks puzzled. That's true.
Yeah, like, wow, it's not supposed to snow right now.
Yeah. But I love this thing. It's this total self-gift that he's doing. I mean, from like Pope St. John Paul talked about that total self-giving in a relationship, that it's about giving love without expectation of return, that you've given yourself entirely to the other. And that's the most selfless kind of love. So really kind of nice moment there. And then, of course, he wakes up and I Got You, Babe plays on the clock radio. but she's still there, and then it turns out it was a mistake.
And it's not the same cue. I Got You, Babe starts at a different part of the song. So they fool you, but if you're paying attention, you realize, wait a minute.
Because the minute that song starts, he's like, something's different.
Yes.
His eyes go open, wait, something's different. But bringing you back to what triggered the end, I'm reminded again yet of another movie, and that's Freaky Friday. The two versions. There's two versions of Freaky Friday, both made by Disney. One in the 70s with Jodie Foster, and the other one with Lindsay Lohan and Jamie Lee Curtis. But both of them are about seeing the world through the other person's eyes and achieving some sort of selflessness in their lives. And that's the trigger also in both of those. So the Freaky Friday first one came out before Groundhog Day. I wonder if that influenced it at all. And but sorry, I just had to throw that out there.
No, that's good. That's good.
That's good. Yeah.
In the end, I realized, I look at this movie, and I think I said this earlier, this could have been a much darker movie, but it wasn't. It was ultimately an uplifting movie. This is a movie that leaves you happy, hopeful, with a sense of that human nature. There's something good in humanity that we can, all aspire to. I really love that thing. And Phil goes from being a prisoner of this loop to being master of himself and of this time that he's stuck in. And he's because he was being able to do what you can in the moment, no matter what the consequences. And so at first that has a dark meaning, being able to do whatever you can without consequence. But in the end, it's being able to do what you can, being able to do the good that you can, no matter whether there's actual consequences or not. And I really like that. It's really kind of fascinating to me how the movie, this comedy, this fun comedy, has this deep message to it.
Yeah, what can I do for you today? Because that's what he's been doing. Even though my daughter asked, why is he trying to save that guy? He's just going to have to do it again tomorrow. And I'm like, well, that's it. He will do it again. If he saves him and figures out a way, he'll do it every day. He'll save the guy every day.
Right.
That's just what he's learning. And it's not about, oh, well, what's in it for me tomorrow and what's my future? It's about what can I do for you today that's going to make your day better. And
at the end of the movie, what you realize is he's become the best version of himself. And we hear that a lot in our circles. But how do you become the best version of yourself? He's been woken to what love is and how to do for others, how to put others ahead of self.
One of the things I think I saw that I forget who said it, was maybe Danny Rubin, who said that one of the things he found, it was the greatest gift is actually, I think it was Stephen Tobolowsky, the guy who plays Ned, Needlehead Ned, who actually I saw him interviewed about this, and he was amazing, his insights into this movie. I'd love to hear more from him. But he said the greatest gift, we see here that the greatest gift for Phil is to be finite again and to be with his beloved. That's what he really was you got his most joy from, he's finite again. He's not immortal in the sense of living without consequences days over and over again forever and ever, but he's finite and he's with his beloved. And that's enough for him. Let's settle here. Let's get a house in Punxsutawney. Now, in the end, like I said at the beginning, Buddhists, Christians, atheists, they all love this movie, and they've all said it expresses, the heart of their beliefs. Buddhists will say, oh, this is the heart of what we believe. Christians, oh, Catholics, oh, it's purgatorial. Oh, it's about heaven. Atheists, it's about the essential human nature that doesn't need to have an external God, whatever it is. And it's interesting that it does that, because what this movie does, I think, is it expresses the universal truth of human nature, and so well, so much better than so many other movies do.
Yeah, that's where I think, and the one thing is they weren't trying to do that. I mean, you go back and they're like, we didn't try to make a religious movie or try to purposely appeal to any sort of religion, but they stumbled upon the truth because it's who we are, and so as they went through what Phil would go through in his evolution from the beginning to the end, the truth of human nature and the fact that we are created to be this way. We were created by love, for love, and that's how we become the best version of ourselves. They made that movie not even realizing what they were doing. And that's just how it, and it just came out that way. because it's the truth.
Yeah, it's because they were just trying to express truth about that they had access to, truth that they knew. This trying to be real with what they were able to encounter, and that's why it can be a Christian movie without being made by people who see themselves as Christians. Because to be Christian is to be a Christian movie doesn't mean it has to have Jesus named in it. Doesn't have to be made by Christians. It has to express the essential truths about existence, about reality, and I think that it does. That, and if to kind of leap to the other direction, that's what I find so wrong about so many Christian movies, explicitly Christian movies, is because they think that in order to be a Christian movie, they have to espouse Christian doctrine explicitly. They have to be, outwardly Christian. And this is one of the things that SQPN has always been about is, no, the fact is you can find these truths, you can find the deeper meanings, the hidden layers in many places of our popular culture. It's expressed more, very clearly here in Groundhog Day, this funny movie about a rodent and a weatherman. but we find it in so many other places too, and that's one of the reasons I love talking about this stuff, is because you're entertained, but you're also learn something. You're also connected to something deeper.
I remember watching some episodes of Friends during the time when Ross and Rachel broke up because they were on a break. And
we're on a break.
And the whole thing. Yeah, and I think it was with my daughter, but I can't remember who I was talking to. And I said, you see the pain and the agony and the anguish of what is going on with these two people that were in a non-committal. They weren't married, but they were in a very physical relationship. And then it broke off. They weren't committed in marriage. It broke off, and he cheated. And now there's this pain that I remember, is expressed in theology of the body, like that God never meant us to feel the pain of this, that we weren't supposed to unite ourselves to someone and then be ripped apart from them. And they showed that very well in the Ross and Rachel pain of what the two of them were going through. It actually would bring back memories of my high school. And I'm like, I don't know if I really like this that much. It was so well done. And so they stumbled upon this truth. They of course, I don't think anyone on the show would say, it was because they were, sexually active that this all happened. But that's the reality of what they did and how they could not, the pain of what they were going through.
Right.
Was so well done. And here's Friends who were finding theological truth in a show of Friends,
God is everywhere. Yeah, anywhere that there's truth, that we will find Christ. That's the reality of it. So Groundhog Day. Last thoughts? Anything you want to say as we wrap things up here? I bought it. I didn't own it. I just bought it to have because I know I will watch this movie over and over again.
I have it, but it's in storage somewhere. But luckily, I was able to find it on demand, on TV, so I don't have to pay for it. But the final thoughts is, it's funny that there's people that love this movie or can't stand it, like I said before, because they don't necessarily get it. And sometimes, like my wife, I'll be like, "Oh, Groundhog Day," and she'll be like, "Oh gosh, Groundhog Day," and she just can't see it's so goofy. You really do have to, get past the goofiness of it and peel back the layers to see, what's really going on underneath.
Right.
All the humor, and maybe the annoying repetitive scenes of like him coming in and ordering the drink and then getting the toast correct. And then, and then he has to get the French poetry correct and all that.
I always drink to world peace.
Yeah. I mean, when he does the world peace, yes. And he says, "I like to pray a prayer in the world peace." And then he literally pauses and goes, "Amen." And then he drinks his drink. It was so well done. But anyway, you can enjoy it just for the fact that it's a hilarious movie. Or you can get into it like we do. That's one of the brilliances of it.
Yeah, no, it's one of my everyday favorites. It's just somewhere in the mix. And so when you said we were going to talk about this, it was, of course, Groundhog Day. So our pastor once did a little movie club where he'd invite us to come and sit and watch the movie and then talk about it from kind of a theological point of view. And this was the very first movie he did. And so I don't know. I just love I love the message. I love that we can continue always to improve ourselves, that every day we can do something in the minutes and the time that we have even if it's not on an endless loop. Every day is a new opportunity to be better than we were the day before.
Very good. All right, so that's where we'll put a stop to it. Before we wrap up, I want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Secrets of Movies and TV shows, including this time Father Jason, David P., Lizzie G., Philip S., and Father Leo. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Movies and TV shows and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What do you think of Groundhog Day? Are you one of those people who love it, or are you one of those people who don't get it? Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/secrets, or on the StarQuest Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or via email at secrets@sqpn.com. Until next time, Shelley Kelly, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Groundhog Day.
Thank you very much.
And Mike Denz, thank you as well.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Movies and TV shows on StarQuest. And remember, am I right or am I right? Am I right?
I'm right.
Bing!
I'm right. Right.